Binge the full week of The Ray Taylor Show ad-free over at patreon.com/inspired disorder.
What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.
Malignant. It's a new movie out right now, directed by James Wan, the man that created the Saw franchise, produced, directed the first, wrote the first, also Insidious, also Conjuring. He dipped into the Fast and the Furious franchise for Furious 7, which I believe I really enjoyed that one. I think that was the Paul Walker Memorial one. I could be wrong, though. But also did Aquaman, which out of the DC movies was the least horrible in a lot of ways. I thought it was okay, but I prefer James Wan doing like Saw. Like, less is more. And I have a lot of thoughts on this movie. I've read a lot of comments on Twitter, etc., of a lot of people, mainly horror genre fans, completely geeking out on this movie, which adds to the complexity of my thoughts on this film. Overall, I enjoyed it. There are things with this movie I have huge... that just didn't work for me at all, that just completely took me out. One of which is the writing. Some of the writing is it's just sad. But knowing that this is kind of knowing the backstory and the context of this film makes me understand why the writing is potentially as... it definitely is a film that in a lot of ways is hearkening to a lot of the horror genre films that also have pretty horrible writing. Like, writing and dialogue in horror films is not necessarily the biggest kind of focus for somebody who's creating this type of film. A lot of it goes into the tension, crazy horror set pieces, maybe gory set pieces, things of that nature tend to be more of the focus in horror films. I get it. Similar to action films, similar to porn, right? The story doesn't have to be that great. Because we're not there necessarily for the exposition and the character interactions necessarily. We're there to be scared. We're there to be emotionally manipulated in a very specific way. And I think this movie does a good job. But big parts I didn't like. And I'm going to get into spoilers. Obviously, if you're a big horror, if the genre of horror, you're a big horror geek, everything that I've seen, you will love this film. If you aren't into horror, maybe you're into movies that are so bad they're good, because you could take this movie as just a so bad it's good, like, B horror film. I mean, it does have the big budget that you would get from somebody who's directed films that have made billions of dollars. It has the budget, it has the special effects, but the story and the aspects and ingredients that are put into this cake, this horror cake, those things are very unique to the genre. And if you like, you could take it as a comedy, or you could just take it, if you're a horror fan, there's a lot of things you can take, which, for me, I am a horror novice. I always used to have the idea that I wasn't into horror movies, but recently I've kind of learned that I tend to watch a lot of horror movies. Like, I want to like horror movies, and I have to be kind of in a mood for a horror film as well. But with a lot of genres, when you get into them, there's a lot of stinkers. There's a lot of films where you have to shut your brain down enough to go along with the ride. And that's true with independent films, art house films, even a lot of foreign films, just a lot of lower budget films. Tend to suffer at times because it's not their primary focus. Or there's also trends that have happened within the genre of horror that people really geek out on. Like there are like subgenres within horror, which I am very just dipping my toe into, thanks to the podcast Screen Drafts. During Octobers, they do a lot of horror themed episodes where they draft and rank best of lists in a specific subcategory or category of film. And so I've watched, and just listening to people talk about it, educated people talk about it, I get a lot from it. Like recently, they did a Fulci draft, so I got to like he's like the most gory guy. He's like the guy that there's a movie where he was taken to court because the gore looked too real. So I can appreciate that as I'm becoming more educated. So for that reason, I was so prepared to just talk shit about this movie. But there are aspects of this movie I liked. It takes a long time to get to those aspects of the movie that I like. But overall, I mean, the story of Malignant is obviously a horror story. It's this woman who's a nurse. She comes home one day, which, by the way, big house for a couple that seems to be fairly, low income, let's just say. I don't know what the husband does, but, nurses should be paid a lot more, but they're not raking in the dough. They're not multimillionaires. They're not living in giant houses in Seattle. I don't know what the real estate prices are in Seattle, but that's not a problem. It's whatever. It's a big house. It's a horror movie. I step past, right? One of the many things that I'm kind of having to step past to get into this. But anyway, not healthy relationship. He's a dirtbag. He's drinking beer, watching UFC or some MMA. I don't think it was actually UFC. They probably would have been sued. But some regional MMA fights. And, to kind of show what kind of dude he is. And she's coming home from work in her scrubs, pregnant, clearly. And he's just a complete asshole. Like, shoves her head into the wall. Which is a big point in the whole overall story, that moment when he slams her head against the wall, because that sets into effect a chain of events that lead to the monster aspect of the film. That it wasn't until the mystery of the villain was explained towards the end, halfway to 3/4 of this film, you kind of understand, like, there's this whole thing is like the thing's moving weird. It's like maybe her imaginary friend that's going around killing people, right? She's having like connections where, like, mental connections where she'll be standing in a room of her house and like the amazing special effects kind of blur her room into a room where the killer is about to dispatch their next victim. And so it's a big mystery. What's going on? Who is this? And there's a little setup at the beginning of the film where it's, a science lab doing experiments that go wrong. And we have to, like, remove the thing. Okay. Once that was explained, once I found out what the monster was, and it then explained why the thing moved so weird, I enjoyed it a lot more. Plus, the movie starts to become more of an action film in a lot of ways. Like, there's action set pieces in this movie, which the movie, I feel, is shot a lot like an action film to begin with. There's a lot of use of super wide angle fisheye lens, specifically one where it's outside of the house and the car's pulling up to it, And it looks like the car, it's right when the image becomes distorted in a fisheye lens when you get really close to it, and then it turns into the driveway and the camera does a little pan. There's a lot of use of, I felt good use of fisheye lens versus the most recent film, No Sudden Move on HBO, or I guess it was the same as this movie, which I really enjoyed that movie. But that use of fisheye lens in No Sudden Move, was kind of difficult. Was like I felt didn't add to the film. I felt it took me out. Where this was interesting. A little over 4 years ago, I started The Many Faces. It's an ongoing series of abstract ink portraits. Each piece is improvised. Each piece is released daily. Start collecting now. Head on over to inspireddisorder.com/TMF. That stands for The Many Faces. And save yourself 25% when you use coupon code RTS. That stands for The Ray Taylor Show, because that's what you're listening to, and I love you. So I want you to save 25% when you use that coupon code. Head on over to inspireddisorder.com/TMF and use coupon code RTS to save 25% when you start collecting one of over 1,600 original ink paintings. By myself, I made them. Support me. I love you. Back to the show. There's also a chase scene in this giant house. This is registered nurse and dirtbag live in this giant house. There's this chase scene early in the film, another action-y moment, and it's shot from top down, which I thought was super interesting. That's actually when I had the idea of, or the thought of, that's like a huge house. And then I looked up, where is this film taking place? And it's Seattle. It's like, Seattle? You're buying that giant house in Seattle, and you're just a registered nurse and a dirtbag that just drinks beer and watches MMA. You're affording, that's the house you're running around in? I don't know. I just took me out a little bit. Still a fun scene, action scene. Enjoyed it. So yeah, a lot of it is filmed action-y. And towards the end of the film, when there are the action set pieces, specifically there's a fight scene in a jail cell, is awesome. I think that's around the time we find out everything, like what the monster is, how it's connected, which I don't know if that's a twist necessarily, but I love that action scene. That action scene was good. The movie's great at building tension. Great. Like, there are so many moments in this that worked, even though people were doing extremely stupid things, right? Part of the bad writing, but also part of the genre. So I can kind of give it a pass. But the tension, I thought, was great. The score kind of took me out. Overall, the score is great. It's like a toned down, like almost like a Requiem for a Dream in a way, more synthy, very basic, or like a maybe Halloween score in a way. Like, I don't know. But there's moments in the score that are clearly like chords from Where Is My Mind by the Pixies, the song that ends Fight Club. And it just, there's a few chords and then it goes off. But every time that piece of the score comes up, it just, because there's like a symphony version of Where's My Mind, I believe is the song that's featured at the beginning of Big Ass Spider, which if you just look up that clip, it's like this slow motion scene from that movie using Where's My Mind, but it's a cover. And it's like a chill, I want to say more like orchestrate. Anyway, part of that song is in the score to Malignant, and it took me out. Because I'm like, the first few times, like, why does that sound so familiar? And then it comes up again. It's like, oh, it's this song. And then it keeps coming up every once in a while because it's part of the score. It's almost like the theme song you know, like horror films have that theme music, and this piece feels like it's trying to be that, but is way too similar to Where Is My Mind. Curious to see if that causes any legal issue for licensing, considering it's on HBO Max. But a lot of the times, things like that are reasons why you can't find movies anymore, is because of licensing issues with music. So hopefully that doesn't become an issue because it's super similar. But that took me out a little bit. Just one of the things that just took me out. Not a big thing, but it's just like, instead of me being in the movie, trying to be scared, running with the momentum of the tension of a scene, like instead of that, I'm taken out thinking of like, oh, what song is this? What is this? It's like when McDonald's commercials used to steal music, and it would sound a lot like a popular song. Like I remember one that sounded a lot like a Red Hot Chili Pepper song, but they changed a couple of the notes. But it sounds like, or like elevator music, where it's just like it's a Muzak version. It has that feel to it, but they just changed a little bit. Anyway, interesting. The monster is interesting. The way it moves, I thought was interesting. And once everything's explained, it makes sense. But the action moments I really enjoyed. Like those were the most fun moments for me. Not that the scary moments leading up to that were okay. I just thought the acting and the writing in between those scary moments wasn't helping the movie for me. So once it gets into action, you don't have to. Plus, I kind of got the vibe of the movie by then. But the action, that really covers up. You don't have to. Not a lot of dialogue when there's action scenes. So for that, I enjoyed this movie, right? Because it's got like things for the horror genre people. Maybe it's trying to do too much. The fact that it's filmed kind of like an action movie, I feel is super interesting and adds just a level of style that you don't necessarily get, especially for a movie like this. So I thought that was good. The tension stuff was good. The action set pieces were good. I thought it was interesting. And does it set up for more? It seems like, does it? I can't remember the end now. The end of the movie. But yeah, the melting effects were cool when she, was kind of teleporting or channeling. It's almost kind of like the Last Skywalker. Is that the one? The Last Jedi. Where they like mind meld in a way. It's kind of like that, except for they're not talking to each other necessarily. She's seeing what the villain is seeing, which adds to, because it's a horror movie, so it's like the whole time I'm like, is this a supernatural thing? Is this a twin? Like at one point, she had a brother, Gabriel, that like she used to talk to when she was, adopted at 8, which the scene where her younger sister finds out that that her older sister was adopted at the age of 8, was kind of took me out a little bit too. That was another one of those scenes. But still, whatever, like knowing this movie, knowing the monster in this movie, how that just on a physiological level, a biological level, just couldn't happen. Like you have to so much of this is like, for this movie to exist, your brain has to be in another dimension anyway. So the fact that I had all these little nitpicky things, I think speaks more to the fact that I wasn't going into this movie knowing what the vibe of this movie was. I knew it was a horror film. I knew it was by James Wan, which I haven't seen a lot of the horror stuff he's done except for the Saw movies. But, I've enjoyed some of his stuff. I don't think he's horrible. I don't think he's amazing. But I think what he's doing here with this horror film, I think, is more amazing. I think he clearly lives in a horror world. Most of the movies he's done are horror films, except for, like, I think the only two exceptions are Aquaman, which he's doing the sequel to, and Fast and Furious 7, or Furious 7. So he lives in that world, but it's interesting that he took probably techniques and visual ideas from doing a couple action movies and then implementing those into what he does love, which is horror film. So I find that to be interesting, that he's kind of merged those two genres in a little bit of a way, just a little bit. Like, it's not an action horror film. It's not like Army of the Dead, where it just doesn't know what kind. It's like, it's not a heist film. It's not an action film. It's not a horror film. It's a Zack Snyder film. So I appreciate James Wan for that. And even though the movie, it's okay, I like the end. I can understand why people love it. And there's certain people I would recommend it to, like if somebody is into horror films or, horror films with little sprinkles of action. I think it does. I think it's really interesting to have that kind of B horror genre film in an A+, like, budgeted movie. But it's like, still, get better actors and writers. Like, polish that up a little bit. And I'm on that ride no matter what, and doing, like, low-quality stuff for an homage, speaking to an homage or a type of film. I guess. I don't know. Let's see. Is there anything else that I missed here? There's a therapist, like, she starts getting these visions. People start dying. She goes to a therapist that seems to be doing hypnosis while also it being kind of a possession type of. It's a very confusing scene. Not really. It was just like somebody calling a person a therapist that doesn't. I don't know. It really did feel like a quote unquote bad horror film where just the writing is just like the laziest type of writing, like the least amount of researched writing you could have. Like, it's the writing where if you had a buddy read it over, they'd be like, wait, why? Like, I have some notes. Like, just somebody would have notes. Just a normal person reading this would be like, why are they speaking like this? Why is this happening? But overall, if you're looking for a crazy horror film and you have HBO Max, I'd go for it. And I've seen a lot of people talk negatively about this, that it feels more of a comedy. Listen, I love comedy. I don't mind that. I don't think it's intentional. I think the movie's intentional at what it's doing, and I think that some of the tropes that are found in this genre can be funny, but it's not like a Tucker and Dale versus Evil level of trying to be funny. It's not like a satire necessarily. But if it's a movie that you can laugh at, like, there are movies that I love because they are so horrible. Like, that's okay. Like, if you get something out of this movie, that's the most important thing. And I think that it does have the scares. I think it does have the tension. I think the action moments were interesting. I thought the creature was interesting. The kind of mystery of that was interesting. And I enjoyed the movie quite a bit more once that mystery was explained. And I'm glad they didn't wait to the end. It's like a third act, beginning of the third act. You're like, oh, this is what's going on. So it's got some moments, got some things that I really enjoyed. So check it out, or not. If that sounds like horrible stuff for you, don't check it out. But it is called Malignant. It is on HBO Max currently, and it's directed by James Wan, which, I'm looking forward to going back through the Saw franchise, because I've only seen a few in the beginning, and I kind of fell off, and it's just, I purchased them on an Apple thing. They have bundles, so I got all of them. Eventually, I'll go through them. It's. I had to be in the mood. I got to feel it. I'd be like, I'm channeling some James Wan right now. I'm gonna dip into like 15 hours of movies. I don't know how long the franchise is added up, but it's gonna be a few days, I'm sure. But yeah, check out Malignant. New episodes of The Ray Taylor Show come out every single day. Subscribe on IGTV, YouTube, and everywhere else podcasts are found. Binge the full week ad-free over at patreon.com/Inspired Disorder. Buy a Ray Taylor Show merch over at inspireddisorder.com. And follow the show on Instagram at Ray Taylor Show. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!